Hello everybody and welcome back to a lecture series. I'm Ted, your host, and for this lecture we are going to continue right along with our examination of Mesoamerican society. Well, not even just Mesoamerican, but just pre-Columbian American society. In our last lecture we examined the Maya, one of the more longer lasting and deeply impactful for Mesoamerica. One of the greats in human civilization, to be certain. One of the few cultures to develop the concept of zero and represent zero, give zero a symbol. And the other great culture to do that would, of course, be Indian culture. They gave out the zero that we know. The Mayans used a seashell for it. We sort of trailed off at the end of the last lecture, but sort of like jumping the gun a little bit. With the impact and legacy of pre-Columbian American societies, especially those in Mesoamerica. But in our last lecture, we examined a lot of the key aspects of Mayan society. The ball game, for example, which was not just merely something for entertainment purposes, but carried a very real, very tangible religious reasoning or religious motivation and religious purpose for Mayans. We examined the whole cultural bloodletting in Mayan society, how it wasn't just about sacrificing their enemies or the undesirables in their society, but everybody sacrificed their blood, and that it was a sign of respect to their gods. And with that being said, I'd like to dive right into our lecture topic for today. And in our lecture topic, we will continue to look at the cultures in the Americas. And jumping back a bit to the Olmecs, once again to reiterate, the Olmecs are the oldest known civilization in the Americas. That would be the oldest known cultural group that that exhibit all of the markers that I said at the beginning of our course that we use to mark off civilization. That is urban housing, that is creating finished products, engaging in long distance trade, developing some sort of a writing system, and organizing labor, having outlying agricultural zones to support those people living in the cities who would otherwise have to be engaged in food production. But beginning around 2000 BCE, the Olmecs were joined by a group of people in what is now northwestern Peru. These people would begin producing some of the just most exquisite ceramic pottery that we know of. During the next millennia, they began to construct ceremonial urban centers with monuments and structures there. Common features of these sites were massive earthen and brick terrace platforms arranged around three sides of a courtyard in the form of a U. Across the base of the U, a pyramid-like structure would be erected. Now, most scholars interpret this as reflecting core cosmological beliefs held by these people. The opposing sides of the U represent the opposing and complementary sides of the universe, and that the crossbar of the U represent the fusion of the cosmically opposed forces. This dualism, combined with a synthesis, underlies many of the myths of the later civilizations of Peru. There are about 20 sites with this U-shaped structures that have been identified thus far. The best known are Huaca La Florida, Cerro Chechen, and of course Garaji. The earliest known Peruvian culture, which is about contemporaneous with Olmec culture, began to emerge around 1200 BCE, and it would last until around 300 BCE. And of course, this would be Sabine culture. Now, the name Sabine comes from the site of Sabine De Huantar, the most famous Sabine site. Now, the settlement was founded around 900 BCE in the Andean highlands. Now, Sabine De Huantar is located at a strategic transportation node with access to the coast and mountains, with access to the coast and mountain passes. That is the trade routes, the big transportation, the big movement routes, points of contact between the mountain zones and the coastal zones. Now, Sabine De Huantar was situated perfectly to capitalize on the bustling trade between the coastal and highland regions. And of course, the importance of Sabine De Huantar emphasizes the interdependence of those regions. Now, various animals, various domesticated animals like guinea pigs, llamas, alpacas, they've all been found there. The llama and alpaca, of course, were used as beasts of burdens. They were also a source of wool. The wool was made for clothing and traded. The guinea pigs were eaten. The llama and the alpaca, they were eaten as well. Now, at its height, this site could have housed around 3,000 people. And Sabine De Huantar has one of those stereotypical U-shaped complexes, along with stone walls. And these stone walls really line the inner enclosure. And they are a series of, and inside this inner enclosure, there are a series of larger-than-life sculpted humanoid heads. These heads have the snouts of animals along with animal-like fangs. In the center is a recessed circular plaza, the sides of which are lined with relief sculptures of jaguars, mythical creatures, some of which are shown holding a staff. These statues have humanoid bodies. They have clawed hands. Sometimes they just have animal limbs. These kinds of creatures will become common features of all of the artistic traditions of Andean cultures. All of the subsequent Andean cultures, they would all practice this as well. Sabine culture will go on to play really the same role that Olmec culture played. That is, they set the cultural benchmark. They established the cultural conventions. They established the writing conventions. They established the trade convention, the importance of trade between the regions. They're the ones who solidify it, and all other great powers or great cultures would emulate. Now, the supreme deity of this culture was a similar creature. He was depicted wearing human clothing, but he had clawed hands and clawed feet. This deity had a feline-like face with feline-like fangs, and the term Sabine reflects the artistic style and the beliefs rather than a distinct culture or really even just a political unit. Later Andean cultures and civilizations were heavily influenced by their culture. The best known Andean civilization, of course, are the Incas, but the Incas are relative latecomers to the political scene in Peru. They formed their empire in 1400. Between the Sabine and the Inca, there were dozens of cultures who all shared this very similar belief with these very similar architectural and religious architectural beliefs and customs, and this very similar, or at least very similar, I should say, religious beliefs and practices. Now, of these cultures, the one that really stands out is the Motet culture. Archaeology involves a lot, and I do mean a lot, of examining clay pots. This is because once clay has been fired or baked, it is remarkably durable, and the only way to destroy it is to break it repeatedly and then grind it into dust. If you don't do that, then your broken pot will simply be shards of pottery, shards of clay. And of course, if it doesn't break, then the vessel will very well hold remarkably well. Ceramic pots are the most durable cultural artifacts. Wood rots, okay? Metal corrodes. The clay will hold firm. The clay will stand strong. Nearly every culture learned to master the process of crafting clay plates and vessels. They all learned to throw them on a potter's wheel, to add glazes to make them attractive and waterproof. The next logical step is to render this functional object visually pleasing by casting the clay into complex shapes, decorating them with designs. Now, while not the most exciting aspect of archaeology or history, learning about and examining ceramics is a very important part of investigating and learning and understanding a culture. Moche culture was based on a series of valleys in Peru, and the Moche flourished between 100 and 800. They utilized the rivers flowing between the valleys. They constructed irrigation canals. They cultivated corn, beans, squash, avocados, all good staples. The Moche also had access to the sea with this rich marine life, and this would be various fishes, crabs, mollusks, crayfish, in addition to guinea pig, llamas, and alpacas, along with wild ducks. They were fairly wealthy, and they were able to develop a very dense urban center that built sophisticated monuments, handcrafted objects. The Huaca del Sol is a pyramid-like building that is made up of 130 million adobe bricks, the largest indigenous pre-Columbian structure in the Americas. The Moche also had very skilled goldsmiths. Moche potters were created vessels that illustrated nearly every aspect of their culture. They were painted depicting people, animals, plants, and gods. They depicted hunting, farming, fishing. These pots, they even have pots that very graphically depicted scenes of war, as well as scenes of love. The pots are notable not just for the paintings, but for their design. They commonly feature inanimate objects. They commonly feature monsters. They have a lot of animal designs. They sometimes were cast as portrait busts depicting real individuals with distinguishing features. The standard pot featured what we call a stirrup or a stirrup bottle, which is a rounded vessel from which two hollow tubes come up and form an arc. Where two tubes meet, there is a vertical spout with an opening at the top. This vessel is either depicted in art. It's depicted in art either being carried by hand or with the arc functioning as a handle, or with a string passed through the arc and it is slung over the back. It featured prominently in a lot of cultures. Now, in its basic shape, it is spherical with a flat bottom, and that's so that storage can be made easy. You want all of your ceramics with a flat bottom so that they can be stored easily. In the more elaborate forms, the vessel is molded into the form of a creature or animal, sometimes a person. Now, all of that will go on to illustrate or to really just sort of underscore the potter's skill, and were perhaps a way of attracting business for the potters. One common feature is a row of armed warriors carrying spears, clubs, or axes, wearing high-crested helmets, along with segmented body armor. Now, another design features elites carried in on litters or humanoid bodies with heads. of like hummingbirds or human heads with the bodies of crabs. It's a very rich hybrid, a very rich display, very rich ceramic display of human and animals. Now, in 1987, one of the more remarkable, really just one of the more spectacular archaeological discoveries in the world was made when a Motet tomb was found. This tomb is known as the Lord of Saipan. The person buried there is estimated to have been around 40 years old. He was buried with lots of fine gold, silver, and copper metal work. He was buried with ornate headdresses and pectoral pieces of armor. He was buried with seashells, earrings, and these earrings were inlaid with turquoise and ceramics. And 6 other individuals were buried there around the main figure, as well as a dog and some llamas. Now, near to this burial, 2 others have been found. One who had been identified as a priest, and another who has been identified as an older relative of the Lord of Saipan. Now, the Olmecs, jumping from Mesoamerica, jumping to Mesoamerica from South America, the Olmecs were followed by the Zapotecs and the Mixtecs. The Mesoamerican side of this area that really sort of like stands out by far due to the sheer number of monuments at Teotihuacan, some 30 miles to the northeast of modern-day Mexico City. 3 miles on one side and 2 miles on the other. This side stretches out in that way, in about 3 miles that side and 2 miles on the other, and it contains something like 5,000 structures. And at its height, Teotihuacan is estimated to have been able to maintain a population of somewhere around 120,000 to 200,000 peoples. Teotihuacan remains one of the largest cities seen in the Americas. Teotihuacan has very large avenues. It is laid out on a grid plan. There are 2 massive stone pyramids that dominate Teotihuacan. Now, we do not know which gods they were dedicated to, but we do know them as the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. And they are both over 200 feet high and 600 feet wide at their base. They are of comparable size to the Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza, though they are shorter by about 200 feet. The pyramids feature broad staircases and temples. Unlike the Egyptian pyramids, tourists can climb to the top of the pyramids. They can climb to the top of the pyramids of Teotihuacan and survey the surrounding city. And it is a remarkable sight to look out from the top of one of these pyramids onto the surrounding landscape. Now, the main street is known as the Avenue of the Dead. The main street of Teotihuacan is known as the Avenue of the Dead, and it connects to the 3 main monuments of the site, beginning with the Temple of the Moon, running down over a mile to the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, and then further down to the Temple of the Sun. Now, the Temple of Quetzalcoatl is part of a larger complex. The most prominent feature is a 6-tier step pyramid. The vertical faces of each level is decorated with stone. These stones form statues of protruding heads. They half depict the god Quetzalcoatl in a feathered serpent form. And of course, this would be a snake head with a ring of feathers. This is the literal translation of Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl simply means feathered snake. Coatl refers to Coatl means snake, and Quetzal refers to the Quetzal bird. I always thought that was I always thought it was very funny that Quetzalcoatl literally means just feathered snake, and not the snake that is the feathered one, or something like that. Now the heads all alternate with one another. They have fangs and round eyes, and the alternate head is thought to be a depiction of the water god Talaq. Now the whole surface was originally painted in bright shades of blue, white, and green. Now the largest Mesoamerican statue, or at least the largest statue that we have discovered thus far in Mesoamerica, is a 168-ton statue of the rain god Talaq, and this statue is associated with Teotihuacan culture. And for years, this statue laid abandoned on its back in a gully near the gully of Cotolinchan, which is some 30 miles outside of Mexico City. And in 1964, archaeologists removed the statue and placed it in front of the National Museum of Anthropology outside of Mexico City. Now, there are a number of burials around the temples of Teotihuacan, and this sort of hints at the mass sacrifices that took place there. Teotihuacan also boasts a number of large marketplaces that hint at the scale of local and regional trade flowing into the city. Luxury goods at Teotihuacan included decorative feathers, cacao, and of course rubber. There are also a number of craft districts in the city, of Teotihuacan, and a number of obsidian mines, local mines, which many consider to be the real determining factor in the city's location. As we noted before, obsidian was both a precious source of income because it was a very important trade good, but it was also a very important source for constructing weapons, tools, and other objects. Now, the basic architectural style of Teotihuacan is known as the Talud Tablero style of architecture. Buildings were constructed with a layered outward slope face, and that's known as the Talud. And on top of this would be another layered with a vertical outward face. And of course, this would be the Tablero. Now, the pattern continues until the structure is complete. We know a lot about the architecture and the culture of the builders of Teotihuacan, but not the identity of the people themselves. The name Teotihuacan was given to the site by the Aztecs, and the Aztecs will come on the scene much later on, nearly towards the end of indigenous rule in the Americas and of indigenous rules in Mesoamerica. Now, Teotihuacan translates as the place of the gods. But again, we do not know the real name of the place. We do not know what the builders of Teotihuacan called it themselves. Now, the city's founding has been dated to around 200 BCE. And we really think that it reached its peak around 500 before going into decline. There's some evidence that there was destruction at the site, but we do not know whether it is due to internal strife or invasion. But what we do know is that by 800, the site was completely abandoned. Now, a great controversy swirls around the identity of the people, of the builders of Teotihuacan. Scholars construct a number of theories regarding their identity. They link them to other Mesoamerican peoples. They link them to the Olmecs, to the Mayans, the Toltecs. Many believe that they were that the site of Teotihuacan was a composite site, or a composite state. That is that the city. The city was founded by and was inhabited by people who came from a number of ethnic backgrounds in Mesoamerica. But again, we do not know. We cannot be certain. It remains a mystery to us. In modern Mexico, there's the state of Colima. in modern Mexico and what is now the state of Colima from around 300 to from around 300 BCE to 300 CE. That area produced a very distinctive vessel cast into the shape of animals. And these animals, these objects, were these vessels, these ceramic vessels, were very simple. They would have very simple openings or a very simple spout at the top. Now, some of the shapes are of animals. Some are of plants like cacti, gourds, ducks, and fish. Some are human, and a few are dwarves. Now, the most standard shape, however, is a very plump little dog, and these pots depict a breed of small hairless dog, not the Chihuahua, the Jolitzkuntli, the Joloid Kuntli, or Zikuntli. Difficult for me to pronounce, as you all can tell. But the dog pots were most likely used to store dog meat, and of course that it would be used for storing dog meats after the dogs have been slaughtered. Now the Colima pots were not painted, but they were glazed to bring out the natural color of the clay. We'll break here, we'll cut here, and when we come back we will continue our look into Mesoamerican civilization. As always, I'm Ted. Hit like, subscribe, and comment. Let me know what you thought about it. Still a mystery with Teotihuacan. We know some, but a lot of the more basic questions about them still haven't been answered. And also the striking sort of step back in pottery with the people living in what is now Colima State, taking a sort of step back with pottery. But we'll continue on with our discussion when we come back. I am Ted. Hit like, subscribe, and comment, and I will see you guys next time.